Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your program Africa Today. This program brings you the latest developments on the ground in the African continent. We start off with the latest news about the fuel shock across the African continent due to the Middle East crisis, where the fallout from the Iran conflict is rippling across the African continent, with countries like South Africa and Lesotho facing rising fuel prices, supply shortages, and also growing economic pressure as global oil markets tighten. We have more in the following report.
A deepening global energy crisis sparked by the Iran conflict is now hitting African economies hard, exposing their heavy dependence on imported fuel. Across the continent, fuel prices have surged sharply after disruptions to global oil supply routes, particularly through the Strait of Hormuz. Many African nations rely almost entirely on imported petroleum, making them highly vulnerable to external shocks. In South Africa, the impact has been immediate. Long queues have formed at the fuel stations, with some running out of diesel and petrol as consumers rush to fill up ahead of price increases. The government has responded by temporarily cutting fuel taxes in an effort to ease the burden on households and businesses. But the crisis extends beyond its borders. Smaller economies such as Lesotho, which depends heavily on fuel imports through South Africa, are among the most vulnerable. Analysts warn that rising import costs could quickly translate into inflation, higher transport prices, and increased pressure on already fragile economies. The situation is part of a wider continental trend from West to East Africa. Governments are raising fuel prices, introducing subsidies, or considering emergency measures to manage the shock. In some countries, the crisis is already affecting electricity supply, transport systems, and the cost of basic goods. Experts say the crisis highlights a deeper structural issue. Africa's reliance on imported energy as global tenders continue. The current shock may accelerate calls for investment in local refining capacity and alternative energy sources. For now, however, the immediate reality is clear. What began as a distant geopolitical conflict is now directly impacting daily life across Africa, from major economies to the smaller states.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're still watching Africa Today, and now we're going to move to a very important topic, which is the Africa trade revolution, which gains speed lately. African continental free trade area, the Africa's path to economic independence, where the Africa accelerating its push towards economic independence as new trade systems, global partnerships, and the expansion of the African continental trade area reshape how the continent does business, both within its borders and with the world.
Across the African continent, a quiet transformation is gaining momentum. The African Continental Free Trade Area, the largest free trade zone by number of participating countries, is moving from ambition to action. Designed to connect more than 1 billion people into a single market, the free trade area is now entering a new phase. Countries are not only lowering tariffs but also introducing digital systems to make trade faster and more efficient. One of the key breakthroughs is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which allows businesses to trade across borders using local currencies, cutting costs and reducing dependence on foreign exchange. At the same time, Africa's global trade relationships are shifting. China is expanding its economic footprint, offering wider market access to African exports, while Europe is seeking to redefine its role as a long-term partner rather than just a donor. Meanwhile, uncertainty surrounds the future of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, the long-standing trade arrangements with the United States. With only short-term extensions in place, many African economies are now looking to diversify their partnerships and reduce reliance on any single market. The result is a continent increasingly focused on trading with itself while also navigating a complex global landscape. For African leaders, the message is clear. The future of trade lies not only in external alliances, but in unlocking the full potential of the continent's own market. As implementation continues, the success of this trade evolution will depend on infrastructure, political will, and the ability to turn agreements into real economic growth.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're still watching Africa Today, and to shed more light on this topic, the African Continental Free Trade Area and the importance of this deal between the 55 countries participating in the deal, we are delighted to have with us over the phone His Excellency Ambassador Ahmed Haggag. He's former Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of the African Unity. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Haggag, for talking to us today in Nile TV International. I would like to start first by asking you about the latest developments on the ground in the trade deal in the African continent.
The treaty establishing the African Free Trade Zone is a recent phenomenon. It was signed during President Sisi chairmanship of the African Union in 2019, and it aims to reduce trade barriers, custom duties among African countries who signed the treaty. According to their national economic development and so on. It came after unsuccessful experiments, which is Organization of African Unity, or the African Union experimented in establishing the African Free Trade Area, and so far. For three reasons. There was not enough political will from the African countries to implement the area. Secondly, the Organization of African Union was very busy in trying to establish independent countries.
The conflicts in the region.
There was many Britain or France were occupying many African countries. And third reason, there was a lot of strong sub-regional organizations which they consider themselves have nothing to do with the African Free Trade Area. But this experiment recent has more potential for success. It needs a push from the heads of state and government. And by the way, many treasuries in Africa consider that their countries joining the free zone is responsible for the reducing of the revenue of custom duties. And the African treasuries are this custom tariffs are an important ingredient of the budget every year, which finances education and defense and everything. But the African Union and all free African levels try to convince the heads of state that the benefit of the free trade zone will outweigh the revenue, whatever the revenue is, from custom duties.
Of course. Ambassador Haggag, we would like to talk more about the reduction of the relying of the African countries on the external market. To what extent can the African trade deal reduce this cost?
Because the more you implement the African free trade area, the more you establish more successful industry or agriculture, which will allow the countries to export more and employ more people, lessen African conflicts. So there is a lot of incentives for African countries to adhere and implement faithfully the clause or rules of the African Free Zone, and establish also African. It is the biggest African free trade zone in the world. So we have an incentives in order to negotiate continental benefits vis-a-vis other free trade zones in Africa, in the world, the European Union or the North American free trade zone and so on.
Yeah.
But we are now encountering a lot of difficulties because of the repercussions of the Iran war.
Of course.
It will affect the most African countries, especially in energy costs.
Yeah, of course. Ambassador Hajjaj, when will be this free area be fully implemented in the African continent, in your point of view?
The reduction in the custom duties will be a gradual process. And according to the how strong the national African economies.
Yeah.
So the big countries will not benefit from the reduction on custom duties, but they will outweigh this by exporting more industrial goods and agricultural products and services.
Yeah.
So the least developed countries is the one who will, if they implement the clauses faithfully, they will also benefit from the African free trade area. So we are doing the same thing which the European Union has done.
Yeah.
The least developed countries in Europe were not subject to cancelling of the custom duties like the strong Africans. So Spain and Greece were less liable for high cancellation of
the tariffs.
Custom duties. Yeah.
Well, Your Excellency, Ambassador Ahmed Hajjaj, the former Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of African Unity, thank you very much for talking to us today in Africa Today. And moving to some African news, where the ongoing conflict in the Middle East is sending triple effects across global markets, as we know, with Tanzania increasingly feeling the strain. Tensions around key shipping routes, including the Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz, have pushed global oil prices higher for Tanzania, which depends on imported fuel also, and this is driving up the transportation and energy costs, contributing to rising inflation. At the same time, delays in global shipping are affecting the flow of essential imports such as wheat and industrial goods, while increasing costs for exports. The tourism sector could also see a slowdown, particularly in popular destinations like Zanzibar, as international travel demand weakens. Although far from the conflict zone, Tanzania is facing the economic consequences of a crisis that continues to disrupt global trade and energy markets. And moving to some sports news in the African continent, celebrations have swept across the Democratic Republic of the Congo as football fans take to the streets, sharing in the excitement of the FIFA World Cup despite their national team not being among the contenders. Let's watch.
From the bustling streets of Kinshasa to smaller towns across the country, football fever has taken hold in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Fans waving flags, dancing and gathering around giant screens have turned the World Cup into a nationwide celebration. Although the Congolese national team is not competing in the FIFA World Cup, that has not damped enthusiasm. Supporters have adopted teams from across Africa and beyond, cheering passionately for their favorites and embracing the global spirit of the game. In major cities, cafes and public spaces are packed during matches, with fans celebrating every goal as if it were their own. For many, the tournament offers a rare moment of unity and joy, bringing people together across social and economic divides. Football has long held a special place in Congolese culture, and the World Cup serves as a reminder of the sport's power to inspire and connect. Young fans in particular see the tournament as a source of hope, dreaming of one day seeing their own nation compete on football's biggest stage. As the competition continues, the celebrations in DR Congo show that the World Cup is not just about the teams on the field, but about the millions of fans worldwide who make it a truly global event.
Well, by this we reach the end of our program Africa Today. Thanks for watching.